Welcome to another episode of WellScope Screencasts. In this episode, we're going to learn how to connect to the WellScope Digital Developer Platform using SSO. There are three basic steps. The first step is creating a payload. This is an encrypted XML string, which I'll show you later in this tutorial. The second step, getting a token. This is a server-to-server communication from your application to the Digital Developer Platform, in which you exchange your payload in return for a token. And the third step, finally, is loading the widget library from your client side of the application, which passes the token from step 2 to load the embedded widget library. Let's get started. Creating a payload involves creating an XML string which has two important pieces of information: the login ID and linked accounts. Okay, it's also important to make sure when you pass in the linked accounts, you also pass the number of accounts. The idea is we're going to create an XML string, which we call the payload. Then we're going to encrypt it using a shared secret that both your application as the encryptor and the Digital Developer Platform as the decryptor can have to use for encryption and decryption. It's also important to make sure that the encryption cipher you're using is the same encryption cipher that the Digital Developer Platform is using to decrypt it. The Digital Developer Platform supports TripleDES, Blowfish, and AES. In our tutorial, we're using TripleDES. I have a very basic TripleDES library that I'm using here. I include that in my script. The script I have here in front of you is a very basic procedural PHP script for creating a payload, sending it through a server-to-server connection using curl, and the response should be a token that I can then use to pass client to server to load the embedded widget JavaScript library. In practice, for production, you would certainly write something that's much more object-oriented, sort of separation of powers, but for demonstration purposes, this is pretty basic. Okay, so here we've got our payload. Here's our shared secret, and I'm passing the payload and the shared secret to the TripleDES encryption function. The result is an encrypted string. The encrypted string is appended in the payload argument to the SSO URL over on the Digital Developer Platform. This block of code here, very basic PHP curl initialization, passing the URL. What we're really interested here is once that is executed, the result token is assigned to this variable. That's going to become important in the next step when we move to the client-side code, and we're going to append this to the URL to load the JavaScript library. Okay, moving on, here is that page. All right, so I've got a basic index PHP page. I include my SSO, so the previous step I just showed you fires, and then we've got the result token variable, which we pass to the standard WellScope Digital Developer embedded widget library. So we load that as a script tag, and you also need to have jQuery present on your page. If all goes well, you should be able to drop a widget on your page and see it load. So for demonstration purposes, I'm using the account list. So we hop over to our browser and reload the page. And our drop-down appears, and we can see all kinds of activity in the browser's console. And we have successfully connected with the platform and embedded a widget.